Appreciate everyone coming out. So my name is Jesse Freeman. I'll do my best to stay near this mic. And I'm a technology evangelist at Microsoft, focusing on Windows 8 gaming. That's my email address. I'm always looking for people who, my job basically is to help people make games from Windows 8. And I like to go above and beyond. I like to help people just make games, because making games is very hard. So feel free to email me, especially if you have an interest in Windows 8. We also have a booth here. If you guys haven't seen a Surface or are interested in some of the games I'm going to show, we have them on display, especially some of the games I'm going to talk about. And my Twitter account is Jesse Freeman, no longer the Flash Bomb. The one guy in the back who knew me before I changed my name. So, at some point, we went from making games that look like this to games that look more like this. And there's nothing really wrong with this. I also have my background is actually art before programming. So I was never a big fan of modern art or commercialized art. And I think Warhol did a pretty interesting thing with making art this factory where he actually hired people just to do the artwork for him. He didn't really paint these, he just had people painting it for him. And he mass-produced art. And we're looking at what's changing in the gaming world right now, and we're seeing this kind of mass production of games. And it's okay because people really like repetition. You have Angry Birds, you have Angry Birds Seasons, you have Angry Birds Space, and you have Angry Birds Star Wars. And something really changed, I think, about the time that Angry Birds became popular, because it really pushed casual gaming into the forefront. And it really made us change our view of what gaming is, because I come from the background of Nintendo. I have my Game Boy shirt on. I mean, I love old school games, and Angry Birds was the first game that was such a mass hit. I mean, I think you can go to like a bodega. I don't know if you guys have bodegas in North Carolina, but New York we have bodegas. And you pick a convenience store, I guess, in a small alley. And you can go to these, and there's like Angry Birds candy, right? And it really reached this pinnacle. And it made me question, and a lot of people really question, what is a casual game? And where are games going? And why are they becoming so successful? So the first thing that a casual game has is mass appeal. I mean, we're talking about really crazy numbers, because if you think about consoles, mobile devices are dwarfing console games, and even PC games. A lot of people have access to it. So we're talking about mass appeal. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people who are playing this game, mostly even on a daily basis. The other part is these games all have very, very simple mechanics. So, we're not using game controllers, we're not using any complex, we don't need to read a manual basically. We can pick up this game and just immediately learn how to play it. In addition to that, they always have this very clear reward and motivation system, right? You look at Angry Birds as this pinnacle example, and it's really easy to see what the goal is. The goal is to destroy everything, crush the pigs, right? That's a normal game concept, destroy the enemy. But it really is the style in which you destroy the enemy, how quickly can you do it, and you're rewarded for that. And because of that reward factor and that cycle, people are compelled to keep coming back and playing it again because they want to beat themselves. They don't even care about it. There's no online leaderboard for Angry Birds, really. It's about you beating yourself and being better than yourself. And so because of that, you wind up with this cycle of a really incredible replay value. It used to be replay value in a game that there was multiplayer, or that they were adding more content into it. And of course, Angry Birds adds content, as we just saw. There's a lot of different variants of Angry Birds, right? But it's really about the fact that you are compelled as a user to continue to play it and get better at it. And that cycle is really rewarded simply by a visual reward. It's not like you get more things, and sure, you unlock more levels, but you don't ever get anything. You wind up just getting a star. And that's enough of a reward. I mean, it's like kindergarten, why they give kids stars in kindergarten. It's like, you did really good today, Jimmy. Here's a star. And kids respond to that. But the most important thing about what casual games do is that they lower the barrier of entry. And they take gaming from this place that used to be, a very small group, and it opens it up to everyone. It really makes us question, how did this actually happen? And it almost was overnight. And this is what happened. The whole landscape of gaming changed based on the devices. For years they would release a new console, and the consoles were pretty much like, okay, it's the same thing, it's just this, more buttons on the controller, yay, better graphics, but the console was always the console, the TV was always the TV. But you never take it with you. And when we look back at these game consoles, it's like you actually need to be in this elite club to be a gamer. You had to own dedicated hardware. And you had to have a Nintendo, or you had an Atari before that, or when PC games came out, you had to have a PC game. Now if you want to do PC gaming, you have to have the best PC possible to actually play that game. But phones said, screw that. We don't care about 3D graphics. I mean, sure, there are really great 3D games that are coming out for it now, but when it first started out, again, Angry Birds, it's not a 3D game. It was really about just core, simple mechanics, and that anyone could play it, especially when you have 5 minutes in between waiting for a train, or waiting at the gas station, or wherever. And that's where people are playing it. Because traditionally, this is what it's other gamers, right? He's playing World of Warcraft. He has his dedicated, keyboard and his arm wristband, and But what we're seeing is that now we've opened up gaming to this casual market. The consumers of games have actually changed. And don't mistake it, games are a business. It's a consumption business. It's no different than magazines and books and TV. It's about getting it to the broadest appeal. And the broadest appeal is this. That's my son at 7 months old. He knew how to use an iPad better than my wife. He actually broke into my wife's iPhone and he figured out the password. And that is the new gamer. And if you think about it, I think when I started playing games, I was 5 years old. He's 7 months, he was 7 months, this was years ago. He's 7 months old and he's playing games. And if you're a person who wants to build video games and you want to build these epic games in your head, you might be kind of freaking out because you're like, well, it's never going to sell, never going to make any money. But what I want to talk about is that it's okay, we can all just be calm and we can still make games. We just kind of have to shift our brain a little bit into making games that people want to play and how we can simplify them to give us a little bit more broader appeal. So in order to do that, I want to take a look at some casual games that are out now. So because I work at Microsoft, I've been a little selective, and I try to find top games that everyone's going to know that are also on Windows 8. So I talked about Angry Birds. I'm not going to go through the mechanics of Angry Birds, but I'm going to pick this one, Where's My Water, as a simple comparison to Angry Birds. Because this is like a new genre of games that have really arisen from the fact that we're using touchscreens versus games that are being ported over from controller type games. So we look at Where's My Water, and it's pretty simple, easily approachable. Actually, the one thing I'll point out, going back to my kid, and I'll reference my kid a lot in this book, is that it's very easy to figure out how to play this game, right? There's one button that says play. There's no settings, there's none of that stuff, right? It's just go in and play. My kid knows how to read the word play. First word he ever knew. And when the game starts out, how many people have not played this game? Really? You guys have Blackberries? This is another one of those that's like on every console. Okay, do I need to explain the game? Well, I'll go through that. But as the game opens up, we have this very cute intro, cartoony scene. They cheat a lot. This is the comic book style intro where it's just an image that gets panned very conveniently, so they don't have to do any animation. But you have an intro before you play the game. And as soon as you play the game, you're immediately thrown into this blocker that tells you, here's how you play this game. Now, how many people remember renting a game from Blockbuster, a Nintendo game, and not even getting the manual? Remember when Blockbuster got sued because they were photocopying the manuals for Nintendo games? So it's like, if you didn't know how to play this game, you're basically screwed. And this just kind of holds your hand through the whole process. Has anyone seen Sequelitis on YouTube? Mega Man! It's like, it's a very good YouTube video to look up, but it really talks about this whole notion that games now, you can't play a game without being spoon-fed how to play it. Which is kind of a shame, because as a game designer, I want my stuff to be intuitive, but the casual gamer doesn't understand intuitive. The casual gamer is loading it up. Most of the time, they won't even pay for it. They're looking for something that's free, and they want to play it so quickly that they can't figure out in the next few seconds they're going to put it away because there's a million other games for them to play. Again, this goes back to the Andy Warhol, soup can. It's like you look at the start screen of any person's phone, and there's a million icons on it, right? They have all the choices in the world. So you have to be able to teach a person how to play a game very quickly. And then as soon as you finish the level, you get rated. So I got 3 duckies. I did an excellent job on just swiping down to the first level. And it immediately gave me that sticker that I got in kindergarten that made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, and now I want to always get 3 ducks. And I got a score. The score is almost irrelevant, honestly, because it doesn't really matter what the score is, it just matters visually if I get the 3 ducks. And then finally, after you do the first level, you're now presented with all the levels you can unlock. Games used to be, you played a level and you went to the next level. Now you play a level to unlock the next level, but then you can go back and, they've kind of taken this open world notion of a game and turned it on its head, because this is sort of open world and you can kind of choose your adventure as long as you're unlocking stuff in the correct order. And of course, the more ducks you get, the further you can unlock stuff. So, and that also becomes like a type of currency, which we see in these games as well. But what about platformers, right? I really love platformers. Mega Man 2 is like my favorite game ever. And so, look at something like Gravity, guys. Anyone seen this? This is on Xbox. This is a popular Xbox platformer game. It's been moved over to Windows 8. And again, pretty easy to figure out what I need to do. I need to hit story, and endless or practice, but none of these are really, I'm not confused as to what I need to do. I can easily move into any type of these modes, and I can choose how I want to play. If I have a few minutes, I can play endless. If I have a lot of time, I can play story. And we're seeing that this, breaks out how you want to play. It's tailoring to the player instead of forcing them to play the game how you designed it. Again, as soon as the game starts up, oh, that's weird. It's not showing me the whole screen. There's a, I guess this is really dark. There's a cutscene, same style actually. There's slides, images back and forth. Shows you this. And here we go. Okay, we're finally ready to play the game. But Mega Man, we have to hear the instructions right now. So now we have to learn how to play the game, which is relatively easy. You simply tap the button and you make him flip gravity, and that's how he jumps up stuff, and it's an endless runner, which is another type of very popular game on mobile. But this is a platformer, and all the controls have been boiled down to tap. Tap, tap, tap. And this is great because, I would say this is like the top 10 gaming franchises in the world, right? But what happens when we take a platformer and try to make a platformer into a modern game? So, Rayman, this is the pinnacle. Wow, I can't say that word now. This is like the top of platformers, right? I think this first came out on PlayStation. This is still showing 2D artwork, hand-drawn artwork, trying to make it in the mobile world. Who's not played this game yet? Highly suggest buying it. It's on every platform. It's on iOS, Android, and it's on Windows. This game is great because I'm sitting like, it's Rayman. I'm going to play this great, platformer, but how am I going to do it on a touchscreen? And of course, before I can even get into anything, I have to pick my level, and I'm like, all right, this is not Freeman. All right, so this is just like every other game I'm seeing now. And I'm getting ready to go in, and I'm like, I know how to play platformers, but okay, I'll get the instructions. But with the beauty of this game is that it's taken everything that made the console version work really well, and it's simplified it so that all it is one button to play. And again, it's an endless runner, and as you go through the level, all you do is collect these floating coin guys. And there's big ones and there's little ones, and at the end of the level, when you collect everything, you're rated. You get this big pinwheel that shows you how many you've collected, and then of course, it unlocks the next level. So this game has totally been changed from a console game that required a controller and was very in-depth, and it was a very long game. It wasn't, I think the console version takes like over 40 hours to beat with all the levels and everything. And now they've boiled this down to something I can play while I'm sitting on the toilet. So, sorry for the visuals. But, the idea is that everything is supposed to be one-handed, like it's a one-handed game. Of course, later on there's some other things there's another button that gets introduced. But, between that it's 2 buttons. You've taken something that required maybe 6 or 7 buttons, and now you've boiled it down to 2. So, what happens when you go even further back than platformers? Right? Pac-Man's safe. But no, it's not. This is the new version of Pac-Man DXL, Arcade, XLR, whatever it is. And this is actually a really good game. I love Pac-Man anyways. And you're like, all right, when's the last time you really wanted to play Pac-Man? But they've kind of moderned it up because as soon as I go into Pac-Man, hey, I get to pick my levels and unlock my levels. And it's Pac-Man. I know how to play Pac-Man. I don't need instructions. But they have a bomb. So they tell you right here, use the bomb to hit spacebar. And in case you didn't understand what a bomb is, they tell you again what a bomb does. So it's like really, and what's even funnier about these start screens, and I'm so against them, but every game has them, is like my kid can't read that stuff. He just knows how to hit continue. But these very basic things, you almost have to dumb this down to like the very lowest level of explaining to someone who's never seen a game before what a bomb does. And of course, you play Pac-Man, and it's an endless runner. I mean, it is the endless runner, but this just, as you keep playing, it speeds it up, and there's tournament modes and all kinds of stuff that they do to really kind of make Pac-Man work in the modern age. I did take this one screenshot because this is one thing that I thought was really interesting that they did visually. Is, by the way, it's like totally not like Pac-Man like you've ever seen before, because the ghosts just stay in one place until you go a certain amount of time, and then they move after you, then they go back, and it's like all the elements of Pac-Man, but totally reshifted into like a techno nightmare. But if you remember talking about simplifying the controls and teaching people how to play a very simple game, if you play the original Pac-Man and you tried to move up and you're in the middle of a hallway or this path, you couldn't do anything, right? You didn't have any visual feedback that, hey, I can't move up until I get to the end of this intersection. Well, now in this game, if you try to move up, down, left, or right, and you're next to a wall, it actually shows sparks to tell you that, no, you can't do that. Like, such a simple, primitive game has now been altered completely to, the lowest common denominator, which goes back to my 7-year-old kid. Although I'd like to actually see him play that. I don't know if he'd be able to play that. So that's kind of the landscape that we're seeing now, and I'll talk about my descent into casual game design. Because when I started making games when I was really young, I really wanted to make these epic 2D games. And then everything changed to 3D, and I did some stuff for, I remember Bungie made Marathon on the Mac, and I was doing all this level editing and stuff for Marathon. I'm like, all right, it's still 2D, but it's in a 3D world. In Doom, I get that. Then everything went full 3D, and I'm like, I just want to make 2D stuff. So forever, I tried to make really big games, and they all failed. And only recently have I started coming back to it and saying, I know what I'm doing wrong. I'm not making them casual enough. So this weekend's Landare. Who's doing the Landare contest? Does anyone know what Landare is? It's a game jam. So it's a 48-hour game jam. So you get this theme, basically, and you have to build a game in 48 hours, which is hard enough to build a game in 48 days, but 48 hours is rough. So for Landare, I think it was like 25 was the last one. There's one this weekend, which I don't think I'll be able to do, but I made this game here, Super Paper Monster Smasher. And I feel like all the casual games have really catchy titles, so I tried to make a really long, catchy title. But I wanted to make an RPG, and making an RPG in 48 hours is impossible. So I said, all right, I'm going to go back to the drawing board, and I'm going to boil down all the essences of an RPG, and kind of like a Diablo-esque RPG, and put it into a simple game. And the theme, by the way, was you're the villain. So you play as a monster, and all you do is click left and right, and it eats people. And if the people hit you from behind, they attack you, and you lose life, and then you fill up a rage meter. And it has all the basic elements of an RPG. There's clicking to battle. There are, all different types of bad guys you fight. Obviously, these are the good guys who are attacking you. You have different levels. You have experience. So, as I'll show you, I'll go through. I made some instructions on how to play the game. And basically, you hit left or right. My son really liked the arrows. I didn't even put the arrows in the final game. He's like, I want the arrows. And my son was able to play this game instantly. And I knew I had succeeded at what I was trying to do. As I was mentioning, all you do is you just run over guys and they explode into a little bunch of pixels. And you run back and forth. The more you kill, the higher up your combo goes, so you can get a higher score. So you try to chain these kills so you can run across the screen one way, get people to come out and just go through them. And then to make it harder, I have all these different types of bad guys. So I have knights, which are really easy to kill. I have archers that'll run up to you, shoot, and then they'll run away. I have pikemen who will run at you and hit you, so you have to wait for them to run away. And then I have defenders who have these shields who will go up and they block you. So it takes 10 hits to kill them. So the other guys will get behind the shield guys and start throwing arrows at you. So I tried to build as much strategy as I could into the game, but by keeping it very simple and very basic. And I feel like at that I succeeded very well. Oh, and then the other thing I did to keep it visually entertaining is that once you level up, you actually fall to the floor like Mortal Kombat style, and like all the stuff kind of explodes and you fall to the floor and you get to the next dungeon. And it just, each dungeon keeps going on and on, you keep getting more and more waves of bad guys. So I tried to take as many of these genres as possible and cram them into something that was easy enough for my kid to play. So then my next attempt at a game is called Super Jetroid. And I really love Zelda. Zelda is also one of my favorite games. And I was trying to think of how I can mix Zelda with a roguelike, but also keep it very casual. And so I really love writing roguelike dungeon algorithms for randomly generated dungeons, but I hate math. So there's a lot of math involved in actually making a platformer that's randomly generated. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just throw a jetpack on this guy. And that solves all my problems. So all the levels are generated dynamic. Well, they were generated dynamically, then I go and clean them up. But I just took a simple mechanic and threw a jetpack on them, and I don't have to worry about any of the more complex stuff like adding ladders or anything like that. So I can fly around. And I tried to come up with this concept of a game where it wasn't even about combat. It's all about collecting gems and finding aliens, not getting killed, and getting back to the surface before you die and run out of air. And you know, again, I finally bit the bullet and I made a level selector. So as you go through each level, you unlock other levels. And this is an actual screenshot from the game. So, although it's incredibly dark, there's a lot of lighting effects on it. The game is designed to make it very claustrophobic. I would say this is my most casual game, but it's as close to the game that I wanted to make, being casual as possible. There's only one control. You can use your finger to navigate up, down, left, or right, or you can use the Xbox controller. But I try to keep the controls very basic. And the idea is that, right, you have to balance, you're constantly losing your oxygen. And once your oxygen runs out, you basically suffocate. So the levels are designed to make you go further down and try to find more valuable gems and aliens, but you kind of get lost because there's no map. But I did something because, again, I'm trying to make games that I want my son to be able to play, and obviously this is like way over, he's 3.5 now, almost 4, just way over his head. So what I did was I added in this feature here for difficulty called Have Fun. And what I've done is Have Fun looks exactly like the regular mode, but I took out the life, the oxygen, and everything else. And what I've done is it's now just this sandbox where he can just float around, aliens don't hurt him, he doesn't ever die, he just gets to collect everything and then fly back up to the surface. And to him, it's the greatest experience ever because he feels like he's playing an adult game. And I didn't really have to dumb down anything. Even if he gets lost somewhere, it's not the end of the world, I can help him. But he still gets the full experience of playing the game without, you know, the frustration. We call it, my friend and I call it Nintendo rage. If you introduce a small kid to like a Nintendo or any game console, they get really frustrated quick and then like throw the controller. Because they have no capacity to understand like how frustrating it is to play a game, and at 3, your emotions are running hot. So what's also good about this, between this mode, is he looks to me to beat the level, and then once I beat the level, then you unlock the Have Fun mode on it. So now we can work as a team to actually play the game. So this is all going okay, and they're doing well for an indie game that I don't really market very well. But I have to do better, and a big part of actually making games is trying to be successful at them and make money. So I talked to a bunch of people who license out games and asked them, all right, I'm working on your game, can you tell me what I'm doing wrong? So I went back to a platformer that I was building a while ago called Resident Raver, and I wrote this I guess a year and a half ago, and I started with kind of a level selector, but it was a platformer, and it's kind of like Super Crate Box. Anyone not play Super Crate Box? Okay, this is a little bit better numbers. Super Crate Box, this is a game conference, right? You guys should all be playing games, right? The basic concept behind Super Crate Box is that you're on this level and then bad guys fall down from the top and you have to see how long you can survive. So I mixed this with elevator action, another game I love playing in the arcade. So I threw an elevator into the mix, and the red doors give you new weapons, but you don't know what weapon you're going to get. The game was like too hard for people to get, and Super Crate Box is a really tough game, and to play it on a touchscreen is even worse. So I went back to the drawing board, and I created Super Resident Raver. Because adding super always makes something better in the title. So, and all these games are on my website, jessefreeman.com, which I'll post up at the end. And I went through my friend Elle, who she's a producer, and she told me, okay, these are the things that you need to do to make this game actually work better, or at least be casual. First, you need an instruction or an intro screen. And I fought it for so long, and I finally broke down, and now as soon as you start the game, I have this little animation where all these people run out, and you're obviously the hero, and before you can do anything, it immediately pops up and says, you need to save the people from the zombies. Let them run off screen. In case you didn't get that concept by just watching them run off screen. And she says, you know, you really need to have simple controls. So I simplified the controls. I took out jumping. I actually took out all the levels. It's now just basically one level. And you just run back and forth killing these zombies. And all you use is the arrow keys to move back and forth. Or you can click and press wherever you want to go. And then for shooting, it's just spacebar, but on a touchscreen, you can just press and hold, and it'll just start shooting. So I pulled the controls down to one finger, which is important if you want to go to mobile. She also said something which I really hated, which is you have to have a place for ads. And you know, the problem is with casual games is that you're introducing casual games to an audience of people who don't understand what it's like to buy a $60 game. Like when games came out on iOS, I was buying everything I could see. My wife was like, what are you doing? Why are you spending all this money? I'm like, I got these 60 games for $60. See that game over there? That was $60. And then she got into the whole thing with, why'd you buy a $60 game? And I'm like, you're missing the point. Games are very cheap on mobile. Like, I just go buy whatever I want because I'm a kid in a candy store. I'm not going to have a coffee at Starbucks. I'm going to play a game for 15 minutes. So, but the problem is that most people like my wife don't understand that value, so she wants to look for something that's free. In order to have free, you need to have ads splattered everywhere. So I have some basic stuff I'm throwing in there for, right now it says help support the game, but I'll have full ads in there when I distribute it to a publisher. And then the last thing, which I think my slides are actually out of order, is having a leaderboard. And oh no, this is another, no, it's ironic of me. This is also another one of the ads. So every time you finish a level, I show you your stats of what you've done, and I give you another ad at the top. And then, right, so then you also have to have leaderboards. I mean, I'm not a big believer in online leaderboards. I actually think, especially on the web, people just cheat at them. It's pretty easy to sniff, the connection for that. But for some reason, some people actually like the thought of playing against other people. So adding online leaderboards, we're just saying I'm working out, but at the end of the game, you get fully rated on everything you've done, and I'll connect it up to a leaderboard somehow and do a top 10. And those are kind of all the things, with the exception of one. Ella also told me to not have pixel art in my game. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. So that's the one thing that I want to do. And this comes up a lot. I really love doing pixel art. It's also a lot easier than doing 3D. But there's another company I'm working with in the city, and the CEO goes to me and goes, Jesse, whenever you want some real art in your game, just let me know, because I have a bunch of artists sitting around who would love to help you out. I'm like, what are you trying to say? This is my art. But that's the case. People in the casual space don't understand retro gaming, right? And they get turned off by it because they think the game is primitive, or it's boring, or it's not the newness, or whatever. So they're looking for games that are more cartoony, more illustrated, and that's the kind of stuff that you'll see that always rises to the top. So I'm going to talk briefly about what I've been working on lately, which is HTML5. So we were kind of talking earlier while we were waiting for the audio to be sorted out about, is anyone making HTML5 games at all? No? You guys are all missing out. All right, one person in the back.
I'm more like HTML5 interactive.
All right, that works. So, I mean, I have a very diverse background in programming. I did a lot of ActionScript for years. I know C#, I know Objective-C, I know Java, then I know server-side languages, so I pretty much play around with any programming language I can get my hands on, and I was really reluctant to go back to JavaScript, but at the same time, making casual games is all about making very quick games that don't require a lot of production or require a lot of people to help you build it. I've never really liked 3D because building 3D games takes so much effort. It's like 10 times the amount of work, too. You're laughing at me because you agree, or okay?
There's something it does.
There's some people like, no, it's so easy, you just gotta rip these 3D models, and you have this guy, and you have this guy. I'm like, okay, well, it's just me at night at 3 a.m. making a game. So, you know, there's a lot of hesitation. You know, I can safely say that HTML5 is widely adopted now on mobile, a big space. So the person I was talking about, Elle, she works for a publishing company that does web game portals for mobile devices in Europe. And this is very big. I mean, it doesn't see like in your head like, all right, well, I don't really want to make web games on mobile in Europe, but there's a big market. And if you want to get games licensed, so just like you had Flash licensing for games, people are now starting to license HTML5 games. And on phones, it just kind of works. You know, clearly because there's no plugin involved, so you don't have to deal with that. And there's also a lot of really great things that are packaging up HTML5 games now. Like you can use PhoneGap. On Windows 8, it's actually native, so if you build an HTML5 game, you can literally take the web game itself and just throw it into Visual Studio and have a game on the store in a few minutes. But also there's these things out there, Cocoon.js, which is a wrapper where you upload the zip of your game to their cloud compiler, and it'll make an iOS app for you, it'll make an Android app, and it runs native. It basically replaces Canvas with an OpenGL surface. It's also 100% cross-platform. Obviously, you know, if you have a modern browser, you know, all these should have like a little tick, like a grain of salt, but, you know, for the most part, Canvas games actually run consistently across any browser that supports Canvas. So that's kind of why I've steered more towards Canvas games than the DHTML or HTML type, you know, games with CSS, because that's like a whole mess. But Canvas runs just like Flash did. It's just its own encapsulated little thing. And the last thing I've learned about JavaScript, now that I've gotten into it, is that it's a bag of tricks. You can kind of do whatever you want with it. So, you know, if you're dealing with C# or XNA or Java or Objective-C, you're dealt with very big constraints of, you know, you need to have lots of architecture in your game. Things can't talk to each other very easily without having to build delegates or communication layers between it. But in JavaScript, you're just like, screw it, I'll just talk to global. Everything's in global. Talk to global. And it may not be the cleanest game you make architectural-wise, but if you're making a game very quickly, it's a lot easier to do that. So, since no one's really doing HTML5 stuff, I'll continue on with talking about a few popular game frameworks. So, a big one that I've been talking about for the last, I guess, year and a half now, and I wrote a book, which I have 2 books to give out, is Impact.js. So has anyone heard of Impact.js? All right, it's a really great framework. It actually costs $100, which is pretty cheap for most things, but it's very hard to get people to spend $100 on a JavaScript game framework for some reason. But it comes with a level editor, and it's really geared towards building platform games, but you can kind of do anything with it. And the best part about it is that it just runs everywhere. It runs on phones, it runs on tablets, and it runs on desktop, and it runs really well on Windows 8 as well. So that's probably, I'd say, the best HTML5 game framework out there. I've played with all of them. A lot of the open source ones are really great ideas, but not finished yet. Then there's Create.js, which if you come from the Flash world, is a good alternative because it kind of uses the same Flash APIs, which I'm not necessarily a fan of because it adds another layer of interpretation. But for the most part, it's a collection of different frameworks that handle sound for you, that handle visuals for you, and other stuff, so you can put them together. It's not a game framework per se, but a lot of games have been built on it. And this is the one that has me the most excited right now, which is just came out. It's called Phaser. Has anyone done Flixel? Used Flixel before in Flash? So Phaser is basically Flixel ported to a language called TypeScript, which is Microsoft's version of JavaScript, but in an open source friendly, we love the web way, not a proprietary Silverlight kind of way. And the idea behind TypeScript is that it's just typed JavaScript, and that it compiles back to JavaScript, but in a very readable form. Not like I've used CoffeeScript before, which is kind of rough because it's its own syntactical language, and then it compiles the JavaScript, but it's not always the cleanest. So TypeScript is really great, especially if you come from a type background. So if you're coming from C# or Flash, it's really easy to pick up, and it doesn't. You can do it with either Visual Studio, obviously, on the PC, or you can use Node to compile locally. So you can do it on Mac and PCs. So this is something that I'll be talking a lot about in the future and building a lot more games with. All the games I showed you, by the way, were all written in Impact.js. So, and if you see them in the demo floor, they act as native. Someone asked me if I built the games in XNA. So you can get a lot of powerful stuff out of HTML games. So with that, I want to leave some room for questions. But a big thing the reason I'm trying to push very hard for the casual gaming stuff and why I'm spending such a short amount of time on games is I'm also taking part in one game a month. So has anyone submitted a game yet for one game a month? Anyone doing this? Oh man, you guys have got to stay in more and make games. So one game a month was created by McFunky Pants, and it's a really great idea. There's all these game jams that are going on. Like I said, Lauderdale is this weekend. That's a 48-hour. This is a month-long one. And what he actually did is he gamified making games. So each month you make a game, you submit it, and you get experience points for it. And there's a leaderboard. And I've already been accused of cheating because I put all my games as ports, and then people got all angry, so I took it down. But it's very serious, these points and stickers you give people. You really care a lot about it. But that being said, it's just a great idea just to make a game because the hardest part is actually finishing a game. And a lot of times we get so stuck on this game has to be perfect. It just has to be this and add this, and soon you have a really nice kitchen sink. But you don't really have a kitchen, and you want to get in the habit of just having an idea, sketching it out, programming it, releasing it, moving on. And a lot of the games I've been building for this, well, take me about 2 or 3 weeks to build, in my spare time. I'll go back later and I'll maybe make them into better games. Because it's a creative process, and I think that's the most important part is to not sit on a game for too long. Just build it, throw it out there, see what people think, and keep building. So, to help people, I released this thing called the Super Jetroid Starter Kit, and this is an open source version of my Jetroid game. It requires Impact.js, but for anyone who wants to come tomorrow at 11 to 12, and then from 1 to 2, in the conference hall, it's in the back. It's called, what is it? It's Ballroom B. I think I haven't actually seen the space. But we're going to be doing, Microsoft's doing talks all day in addition to everything that's going on at the conference, and we're doing hands-on workshops. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about how Impact works or how this game works, I'm going to go through the whole game mechanics and then make sure everyone's kind of set up so that they can use this and hopefully build a game for Windows 8 with it. But if not, I'd be happy to just build a game for the internet and just get into building HTML5 games. It's a lot of fun to play with. And in addition to that, we're also running, because of the conference, we're running a contest now so that anyone who submits a game to Windows 8 by May 22nd has the chance to win $1,000. So basically you just follow that link and then you can submit your game, and whoever has the most downloads will win. There's also second place and third place, and we're also doing other events where I think we pay like $100 a game that gets submitted to the store. So what I do in New York, I actually run a weekend workshop. So I have people coming in every weekend, and I'm teaching them to build games, doing the one game a month, and showing them, saying, oh, the starter kit, the starter kit will let you, it has a level selector, and then it gives you the map editor and all the elements of the game. So instead of worrying about, I'm not an artist or I'm not a programmer, you can just go into the map editor and just lay things out and at least just get that in the store and get used to the idea of game design. So I'm very big on that. So that's kind of my whole talk in a nutshell. My website is jessefreeman.com, and I have a lot of articles on gaming, game development, also app development. I come from also an enterprise software background. If anyone who actually moonlights in that to live and then makes games at night, like I did. I did that too, so I talk about that. And I'm happy to take any questions from people.
Would you say in terms of the casual games, you run into a lot more issues when you're pushing to the Apple market rather than to the Google market because of all the specs that they offer?
To which market?
To the Apple store, because they have so many specs that they're always changing as far as...
Versus which market?
The Droid market.
I would think it's the reverse.
Really?
Like, so I've done Android development and it was an absolute nightmare. Like I never want to do Android development again because you have to support so many devices. And I'm talking like high profile Android apps I've built. We were actually having to blacklist we had blacklist phones because there's so many varieties. I think Apple's would probably be the most straightforward. I mean, it's just different screen resolutions, but I mean, at this point, there's no excuse for not being able to make a game that doesn't scale correctly at different resolutions because there isn't a single device that's the same at this point. If you come from the PC world, this is just how PC games have always been built, multiple resolutions. Mobile phones, I think web would be the hardest because someone can like resize the browser to be like this. But these kinds, as long as you keep the specs correct for the resolution, you're fine. Any other questions?
Yeah, work with HTML5. What I found is kind of hard to tell when do I like do some manual garbage collection. Because I'm just loading resources, images, MP3s, and I'm not sure we're loading the browser or what. So
well,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question. So the question is, when doing HTML5 games, when do you do garbage collection? And the answer is you can't. You can't really do manual garbage collection. Each browser and each JavaScript engine has its own garbage collector. I think like Firefox is a rough one because it'll actually pause the game sometimes, depending on what's going on. But it's just like any other programming you do, even if it's a controlled VM or not with memory management, is you just want to make sure that every time you change a scene or you get rid of something that you null it and it doesn't have any references so that when the garbage collector does come by, it'll remove it. It's the same as in Flash. Like you can't manually, I mean you technically can, but even if you manually call garbage collection on a VM, you incur a huge penalty for that. You have to let it do its own thing. So. Quiet crowd today. I ended early so we can have some a good discussion.
What do you think about how HTML5 is moving? Like, it just got, it keeps having new standards all the time from W3C, and do you think that's the problem with performance issues on certain browsers, or where do you think performance is moving for HTML5?
Well, so okay, the question is how do I sum this up? Performance issues for HTML5. Where are the source of performance issues for HTML5?
Yeah.
So inherently, it's in the browser, right? You're tied to each browser vendor does their own way of handling implementation of HTML5, right? HTML5 is just a marketing term. I mean, really, when we talk about gaming, HTML5 gaming, we're talking about canvas. We're talking about request animation frame, which is, instead of using set interval, we're talking about just the core of asking the browser when the next frame is going to be rendered. We're talking about audio. So audio is probably the biggest problem right now. Audio is just a mess because of patents and all kinds of other fun stuff. What is it? Microsoft, so for IE we use MP3, but Firefox and Firefox and Chrome use OGG files. And then on mobile, sound doesn't even work, so you can only get one audio channel. I mean, so that's a big problem, and that's, I think what, to put a positive spin on it, what we're seeing is that it's actually moving very fast. I mean, iOS now is supporting the new audio APIs, so you can get full audio now in the browser in iOS 6. Other, things are moving towards that. I think that's also why Google is breaking off and making their own browser, because WebKit was holding them back for so long. So, if you look at the evolution of Flash took a very long time to get to where it is today, and not a lot changed in that lifetime until the very end when it, got a 3D engine kind of crammed into it. On the flip side, I think we're seeing, it's only been a few years really that HTML5 is starting to become more mainstream as an alternative, and this is just the next year it'll be even better, and as the devices get faster. It's definitely not a performance issue. JavaScript is incredibly fast. It's mostly a visual issue. So in the end, you're going to wind up with whoever comes up with better hardware acceleration. So whether it being WebGL or just directly accelerating Canvas is the one who's going to win.
Well, the best way to package it for cross-platform so you only have to do the work once.
What is the best way?
Yeah,
Okay. So what is the best way to package up a HTML5 game?
For mobile, right?
For mobile.
Preferably something like C++ where it's easier to install third-party SDKs and stuff like that.
So there are a lot of wrappers that are popping up. I was trying to talk about them. I mean, PhoneGap is the most standard one. The problem with PhoneGap is that it's using the web view, so you wind up with the same limitations as you would in the browser. So audio is a big problem. So let's say you're going to like iOS or you're going to Android, you're going to run into audio issues. But you can circumvent that to your other part of the question is what opens up C++ or other plugins for these wrappers. So since PhoneGap is just a wrapper that sits on top of the native, you can actually write plugins to do audio. So like a lot of stuff I'm doing on Surface RT, for example, I'll have an HTML5 game to get faster sound. Since it's an ARM device, I'll actually do C++ for audio out. So, you know, you can do the same thing with PhoneGap. You can write a native plugin for each OS. Cocoon.js is probably the one that I think is doing the best job because it doesn't use a web view. It just does its own hardware accelerated like mapping of Canvas to OpenGL. So they do plugins that support, you know, built-in native stuff.
So with using actual Cocoon.js or some of the others, you can just integrate that directly with C++.
Well, Cocoon uses its own. Cocoon's like its own cloud compiling system, so you can kind of send the code to them, but they have plugins for most of the stuff that you need. But then you don't have to do these weird sound hacks because you know the two pain points are going to be audio and visuals. So if your performance usually is fine, visually it's just audio is where you start getting the problem if both are running at the same time.
The other pain point too is monetization. You're severely limited.
Well, that's why. So that's kind of where that's one of the angles that I have, at least at Microsoft, for monetizing HTML5 games is that you can package them up as a native desktop app and distribute them to the store and be able to monetize them to the Windows Store. To Cocoon, you can do that as well because it builds in a native iOS and a native Android game. But I mean, the big problem, and kind of why I'm talking to my friend Al, as a publisher, is doing these web portals, is that they're still finding that web portals are still the most. I mean, okay, reality is that mobile devices are huge, right? But there's still a lot more PCs and computers out there than there are mobile devices. So being on the web, it's another reason why I tend to move more towards HTML5 now. Is like, to me, it's still important to launch on the web because that's where the most people are. You know, casual gaming started on the web. It just happens to be incredibly popular with mobile now. But being able to support the web, you can still do ad-based revenue like you always were able to monetize in these games. But I think the monetization question is that it's hard in any game. I mean, if you're in a store, it's very hard to be discovered. If you're on the web, it's a little bit easier to be discovered. But you just have to balance it out. I think the real strategy is figuring out some way to, pick the thing that packages it up the right way and be able to reuse the same code base everywhere.
Right.
So that's what I'm able to achieve right now, at least with my HTML5 games. So I can put them on any platform now, and I don't really change the code that much. So I think on Windows 8, I add things like Xbox controller and some specific stuff, because the hardware can support it, but everything else is just packaged up and put on there.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about, when you're looking at like a console experience, or like the NES or Super Nintendo or whatever, and you're looking to distill that down to for like casual market, like kind of what is your process for kind of deciding what's important, what things you're going to take, how you're going to interpret different aspects of the game, that kind of thing. Just your process in general for that.
So the first thing that I do is I go through and I think about the controls, and I figure out how can I simplify the controls. Because the controls will also influence your game as to what you can get away with. Because if your game requires fine precision, you're going to be in bad shape. So a lot of that, I'll start with just thinking about what is the control mechanism? Can I boil it down to a single point? So either my finger, or is it virtual joystick on the screen? And then from there, I kind of work backwards and say, these are the elements that I want in the game, and then how do they work well with this control scheme, and how can it be simple enough that people can just pick it up and play, and I don't have to teach them a lot about the game. The other thing that I'll go through is I like mixing and matching a lot of genres. So I keep a game diary of like every game I play and what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and I'll just go through and I'll say, oh, I like this, this, and this, and this game. Wouldn't it be really cool if I mixed it with this game and then I made it a single point of controller? So I'm constantly, like I said, I'm buying whatever. Even though I work at Microsoft, I have an iPad, and I just buy like whatever I can on my iPad or whatever game. I have a Wii U that's sitting in my my closet that's collecting dust. But I went through all the games that had the Wii U. I just bought them all. And I'm like, I go through every one and I just sit there and figure out what's good in these games. And then I use that to help influence the next game I'm going to build. But hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
It's it's tough though to make, because then you fight, then as a game designer, you're like, I want this to be great and epic. And then the game is like, it's on this screen, this big. And
How often do you fail at that process?
I still feel,
Start off, yeah.
I still feel like my games kind of suck. But I mean,
Every time.
Every time I'm an artist, so my background is an art, so I have that struggling artist mentality where it's like, my art is awful, I hate myself, and then I publish it, I'm like, okay, all right, what's the next thing? No, it's just like a torturous experience, but you know, it's rewarding at the same time. It's just, I mean, I don't know, like in my head I see where I want my games to be, because I think consoles, and then I come out with these little mini games, and you know, people play them and they like it, and I get a lot of comments that people enjoy the game, so that makes me feel like, okay, well, I guess I'm onto something versus.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean the product either. I just mean like in terms of that process initially.
It's tough. It's like absolutely aggravating. I think it'll be easier for my kid when he grows up, because like for a long time I was afraid that he would have to build 3D games, because like all he grew up with would be like consoles. But now they're all gone, so he'll grow up like Angry Birds. He's like, all right, all I need is a little physics, and he'll be building games in no time, and you know, it won't be a big deal to him. There's one other question.
Did somebody else have?
I don't know, someone else have a question?
Are you familiar with JSIL?
JSIL, is that what Firefox, Mozilla just?
No, it's a independent project. It's like you can take x84 code.
Oh,
and
yes,
convert it to-
you can compile it to JavaScript.
Yeah.
I've seen that. There's a lot of stuff out now that's compiling. I mean, even Unreal is now compiling to JavaScript and running through the browser, although it's only in Firefox in one particular build. But it's coming. Like I think that, I mean, you know, and Chrome has a native extension. I mean, there's a lot of cool things getting to JavaScript. I think the thing that I'm getting into more, which is always my opinion of JavaScript, is that JavaScript is a means to an end. But I don't want to be working in that language. I want to work in a language that has more structure, but it just compiles down to JavaScript. And I don't want to think about the JavaScript. I just want to, you know, think about a language I like. So there's also there's a C++ compiler to JavaScript as well, which I think they ported. So I should have put Cut the Rope on here as an example. Cut the Rope is an iOS game that was ported over to JavaScript, and that was also using. They were able to port a good chunk of the native stuff over to JavaScript by cross-compiling it. So I think we've run to time. Who wants an HTML5 JavaScript book? Okay, one to you guys and one in the back who knew me as the Flash button. And then if you guys come out tomorrow, like I said, I'll actually I'll be giving people out copies of Impact, so I'm helping you guys get some. You guys should write them yourself. I'll be picking out some copies of Impact and helping people get up and running with the starter kit to show you how the level editor works in Impact. So at least you can just, you know, I'm not expecting people to, I mean, I would like it if people replace the graphics and stuff, but I really want people just to think about game design and, you know, have a good level editor and just start thinking about HTML5 games and what can be done with it. And then eventually you start picking up a language and start having fun with it. But thanks everyone for hearing me speak. Hope you enjoyed it. I think no one fell asleep this time, so I did a good job.